in the news?
Got a good voice, you know.
Say again?
So you've got quite a good voice. Have you
Thank
thought
you.
about singing?
Mm. Smooth 98.1, love music, love life. Welcome if you just joined us here just in time. It's time for Freshly Pressed 981, where we bring you detailed analysis of stories making rounds in the dailies this morning. Of course, we're joined by our analyst today, leading us through the conversations, Justin EJ. Good morning, Justin.
Morning, world. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Good to see you again. And also, Wade Ehime. Good morning, Wade.
Good morning, Kadi. Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year.
All right, you can find them on social media. It's at justin.ej on social media and at Wade Ehime on Wade Ehime _ Yes?
Yes.
There we go. Okay, on social media as well. You can be a part of our conversation on YouTube. Okay, so go down there. It's youtube.com/smooth981 FM Lagos. And also your messages come to 0809-444-0981. We'll start off with the first story. This one's from the Vanguard newspaper. It talks about the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. Now, we've been going back and forth about this. Nigeria not yet ready for direct primary election model. So let me give a background to this. And this story comes to you, Justin. It says the Inter-Party Advisory Council on Monday, that's yesterday, expressed support for the president, that's Muhammadu Buhari, withholding his assent to the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, saying that Nigeria was not ready for direct primary model. Justin, what's your assessment on this?
Well, I'm not quite in agreement with the notion that we are not ready for anything. I mean, we don't live in the Stone Ages anymore. We are not the Flintstones. If there's anything that should be put into consideration in deciding how we want to conduct elections in this country, there is nothing about us that says that we are ready or not. But I mean, people will talk. The political types will talk. People in the public space will always talk and express their opinions. IPAC, as far as I'm concerned, is another lobby group. They are trying to edge themselves into the conversation here.
Why they?
Advisory committee to political parties,
Since when? When did they form them?
That's a good question. You should Google it. But essentially, what they're saying here is that they're in support of the president's refusal to assent to the bill, and they've given their reasons. The president's own reasons border on logistics and the costs of running direct primary elections at party level. Amongst other things, IPAC is saying, listen, this is not constitutional. Nigeria is not ripe. I don't know if we're a mango and orange or something of the sort. We are not ripe. So they're saying that, we support the president and we think that the National Assembly should not insert itself into the conversation by taking an unconstitutional approach to things, which is what they're saying this is, alleging that if the parties are if we're operating a democracy, then the parties should be allowed at primary level to decide who their candidate is. My personal assessment is that I feel it also breaches the constitutional rights of individuals who have a right to vote and be voted for, who have chosen to join a political party. We talked about this a week ago or so.
We did.
And hey, if I'm a member of a party, I want to have a say in who the ticket bearer is. And the only way to guarantee that.
You know, one of what IPAC is saying is that it might be expensive. Not even might be expensive. It is expensive. And also every party, much like the president says, is that they have their own constitution.
Well, first off, the federal constitution is supreme to every other encoded law, right?
Okay.
Number one. Number two, the National Assembly is the highest lawmaking body in the country. Number three, the basic tenets of democracy, right, should be taken into account. If as a party member, I do not have a say, which is what indirect primaries invariably means.
Okay.
If I do not have a say in who gets to represent my party's ideals, my party's ethos, right, at the general elections, then you have disenfranchised me. So if we're talking about whose constitutional rights are being breached, at the individual level, that also applies. So, but I mean, the arguments on both sides, this is my take on it. We should go ahead and push for direct primaries. The National Assembly should veto the president on this.
Is that what we think? Well, with the way it's still going at the moment, do we think that the National Assembly will lean on the opinion of vetoing the president? Because
Considering that
he's already
they
given his
held,
assent and he's not changing his mind.
they
about it.
held town halls. They went through a whole process before they arrived at that position, right? So it's a bit disingenuous to me to now say that because the president has withheld assent, we're going back to the drawing board. Talking about expense, that means that was money wasted. All the effort and resources that went into holding talks with their constituents, right, before arriving at this position and encoding it and sending it to the president. What happened to all of that? Why are we back at the conversation table? Mr. President does not agree. That doesn't mean the rest of us did not agree and did not give our representatives at the National Assembly a mandate.
All right, thank you very much for that. If you're out there and you want to react to some of the stories we're talking about today, much like Justin mentioned, please send your messages to 0809-444-0981. Moving on quickly, let's talk about labor unions. This story comes from the Guardian newspaper. It talks about labor unions strategizing ahead of proposed fuel subsidy removal. And it's quite the story.
It's a long story.
It is a long story. Okay, so I just want to give a background story to this. But you know what? Just tell us your thoughts.
2022 is going to be an interesting year. It's a pre-election year, and the federal government actually is looking for money, not only to run the country, but also to fund the elections. And if you also look at it, and I guess that's one of the things that Justin was talking about when he was talking about the electoral bill amendment. Labor unions are saying that you cannot remove fuel subsidy. The government is saying that by February they take out the fuel subsidy. So I see this clash coming. I see a number of strikes here and there if the government goes ahead. So something tells me that they won't do it. It's a pre-election year. I'm not sure members of the.
I was just going to ask the question, like, yeah, do you think that they're actually going to go through with it?
I don't think they will go through. My opinion, I don't think they'll go through with it. Not because I don't think they have the what's it called, the intestinal fortitude to go on with it.
You mean testicular fortitude?
Well, the intestinal fortitude to go along with it. Why? Because it's going to cause a lot of chaos, and because it's a pre-election year, campaigns are going to start. Monies have been sought here and there, so they will have to find another ingenious way to raise the money. One thing that can happen, really, if you want to run the direct primaries, is first and foremost reduce the number of registered parties that government give monies to for elections. Every party that is registered on the card gets at least
It's a
50
certain
million,
amount of money.
yeah, about 50 million to run the elections. I really don't know. The elections shouldn't be run. Parties shouldn't be giving monies to run elections.
But
They
say
should
for the
go
sake
raise
of
their
argument,
funds.
though, say for the sake of argument, I mean, they do remove the subsidy as planned, and then the NLC does go on strike. How far do we see this going?
A long way. It's going to
Because
be
they're
quite
not just
chaotic.
talking about.
It's not just the
subsidy.
LLC.
They're talking about.
It's the whole labor union. Teachers could go on strike,
this is
doctors could go on strike. It's just going to
2012 all over
cripple.
again.
You will cripple the Nigerian economy that is already dead. Sorry to say that.
But then again, if everybody does go on strike, like you've mentioned,
Then you go back to where we always start from. Oh, don't worry, we will not remove the subsidy, and then we would go to the drawing board. It's the same old, same old.
also they're talking about the fact that some states have not have yet to the 30,000 minimum wage has yet to be implemented in some states like Zamfara, Taba, Benue, Kano, and Kogi and Cross River states, amongst others. So where do we see this going? As I mean, if it's not implemented now, and this has been said months ago, when is this going to
Months?
happen?
Years ago. I don't think it's going to happen because one, they're not generating enough internal revenue. The government doesn't have the kind of money it used to have, so allocations have gone down. And so now something caught my attention, and it was quite interesting when the former president of the Trade Union Congress, Peter Esele, advised workers to create avenues for making passive income. Apart from, he was one of the he was part of the part and parcel of this thing, because if in 2012 with the Occupy Nigeria they had let subsidy go, that's 10 years ago, we won't be where we are today. So for him to tell workers to go look for passive income in an economy that even their own 30,000 is not guaranteed on a monthly basis, I really don't know what he's talking about.
I want to ask this from an economic standpoint. Taking subsidy away, let's break it down for the layman out there. Is it necessary? Is it absolutely important, or is it something that the government can still do without? Is it absolutely important, or I mean, you know what I'm trying to say? I mean,
Here's the crux of the matter is, why are we the only OPEC country that is not refining its own crude? right? We're talking about subsidies mainly because we are importing refined petroleum products. We have 4 refineries in this country, all dead. The last one was built 30 years ago. There's been no attempt there's no genuine attempt at revitalizing, rebuilding, whichever that catches your fancy,
Just
right?
saying, I speak too
But
much
we,
English.
we devote money all the
Government
time.
should stop doing business. Privatize these things and let us move on.
So in one word, you're saying that the government should take away, should remove the subsidy, and let's face whatever it is that we're gonna.
We should treat the disease, not address the symptoms.
Yeah.
Talking about subsidy all the time is addressing the symptom. Why are we not refining our own crude?
If you have gangrene, cut off the leg rather than die.
All right, thank you very much for that. Let's see. Here's a message from this one's from Dapo from Lagos. He says the Constitution allows the president to withhold his assent to law, just as it allows the assembly to override his veto. This is normal, and why we're making a fuss over this, I don't understand. This one from Benga Kamu says, I agree with your analyst that the Buhari government will push the fuel subsidies removal down to the next government. It's going to be political suicide. Who trusts governments to do right with the money gained from subsidies? And that's from Benga Kamu. Let's move on to our next story. And well, this one comes to you, Justin. I thought we should talk about this quickly, though. It talks about IPOB. Okay, so it's from the Vanguard newspaper. IPOB bans consumption of beef from Fulani cattle in Southeast. And yeah, it's a funny story. Whitey is already laughing, right? But what's your assessment?
It's interesting because it kind of tells you where we're at as a people, right? When people start making statements like, hey, don't eat meat that comes from a certain part of the country. It's sad that we're here. It's a bit funny, but over and above all of that, it's sad that we're at this point where people feel that they have to make these kind of statements. Now, the question is, can this be enforced, right? Can IPOB walk into your kitchen and stop you from eating beef raised in the northern part of the country?
Well, we've seen them at different points in time say that, you know what, on certain days, certain people should not
Sit
go to
at
market,
home,
sit at home. And it
which
happened.
have been
It
effective.
happened.
It's easy to sit at home. But my question to this would be this. Justin, sorry to interrupt you. Who is the person selling this meat in the market? Is it just the Fulani man or the IPOB members who have to make a living? Let's not just throw things into people and say, oh.
Well, the thing is,
it's
there are various breeds of cattle in the country.
Exactly.
There are actually breeds of cattle that are predominantly raised in the south. Exactly. Now, are they being produced in enough quantum to literally replace the supply that comes from the longhorns that come from up north? How IPOB goes about this, how it engages with the native authorities, and they did mention it here. The part of the address was part of the statement was addressed to custodians of tradition, the clergy, and the town unions. So if they're engaging with those kind of influencer groups, right? If chiefs, for instance, are saying to their people in the village, listen, in this village, if you are going to have a burial, if you're going to have a wedding, by our native law and custom, you are hereby mandated to only buy our local breed. Then you might begin to see some effectiveness and things like this. Otherwise, it might just end up a lot of hot smoke.
I hope the local kingsmen, the chiefs and all, are not going to be eating the imported cattle.
Well,
it's yet to see. All right, Lagos. Let's see. We've got some more messages here. Don't forget, you can also reach out to us on YouTube. We're going to take messages there. This one's from Damilola Olawi. He says, talking about letting subsidies go, it's a bit of a revisionist history. The issue during Occupy Nigeria wasn't the subsidies. It was the corruption being funded through the system that was and still remains the problem. Let government solve the problems of official corruption in the system and move on. P.S. Okay. We're going to post our headlines on the WhatsApp story. Thank you so much for that one, Damilola. This one from everyone says, privatize our refineries, put power sector in order, make some of our laws enforceable on anyone who flouts it by these sectors in a way of curbing corruption. Is it a crime to do the right thing in this country? Let's move on to our next story real quick. And this one comes to you, Wade. Talks about Nigeria's debt. It says Nigeria's debt vulnerable, costly, and alerts World Bank. This comes from the Punch newspaper. What are your thoughts about this?
So quickly, currently our debt to GDP ratio is about 27%, which is still good. But the major problem, and which is what everybody continues to say, is this: the cost of financing the debt is extremely high. If you go through the story, you find out that last year alone, CBN had to provide about over 13 trillion of debt to the government, meaning, and that's, oh, we don't have enough money, bring money. And how do you do that? Is that you're printing money, or you are just taking money, or putting, like they say, just putting value into the system, and which is where the major problem is. There's no structure in the way the debt is being taken. There are no long-term debt management structures for you to have lower interest rates, and we're taking more foreign debt, which at the end of the day, because of the exchange rate, is going to be more expensive, which is a huge problem. We're taking short-term debts from the central bank, which at high interest rates, still Nigeria's money any which way, and that is causing a lot of problem for us. So at the end of the day, what the World Bank is saying is, at the rate we're going, yes, the debt to GDP ratio is fine. For developing countries, they're looking at between 25 and 40% of debt. So we haven't even hit the 40%. But the rate at which we are paying the interest.
Can I comment on this?
Is
It's that
extreme.
debt to GDP ratio is a vanity metric. Because honestly, if we're doing things the right way, it can be 90%. The largest borrower, government-wise, in the world, especially the US.
And I agree.
Okay.
Right? It's not the borrowing.
It's
It's
not-
what
it's
you
what you're
do
using
with
it
the.
for.
We are borrowing to finance loan repayment. In other words, we are borrowing to pay people we borrowed
Loans,
from.
yes.
We are borrowing to pay salaries. We are not borrowing to fund growth, industrialization, the things that will then generate the revenue. You don't
But-
pay debt
but
from
Justin, and I
from
agree
debt.
with
You
you.
pay debt from profit.
I
In the
agree.
context of government, profit would be, in my own definition,
When you provide
revenue.
infrastructure that can
Revenue,
increase
tax
your
revenues,
revenue,
and all that. How do you get tax revenue? You increase the productive base. You broaden the scope of
and
taxable.
then
economic
you have
actors,
you have
right?
the required infrastructure that would drive the growth
Exactly.
from the private
So do
So
we
the
have
problem here
those
is that we are
infrastructures?
not funding the
What we're
right
using
things with
debt
the
to
debt. We are
fund is
borrowing to
either-
buy moi moi and akara.
We're using debt to fund either one, interest on the debts that have
Okay.
already been borrowed, or financing recurrent expenditure, which doesn't make sense.
So our debt at the moment stands at 38 trillion. But the question here is this: is it from the story? They're saying that it can.
It's not
get to
sustainable.
unsustainable
It's
levels.
not sustainable because of the rate at which you service your debt. You spend close to 90% of the revenues that you earn to
Okay.
service your debt.
We're talking about this right now, but when will we start to feel the pinch? Because we're saying it's still sustainable at the moment, and it still looks good. It's still
Who
balanced.
said that?
Who said?
It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable.
Never been. Never will
Who
be.
said that?
As long as you are not
World
borrowing.
Bank is using, and like Justin said, they are using the matrices of, oh, you're a developing country, 27% to GDP. But it's not sustainable because the interest at the rate at which you're paying, financing the debt, takes about 90% of your revenue.
So
how
what if
can that
we
be
stop
sustainable?
borrowing altogether? What then?
But you can't stop borrowing because you're not generating enough revenue.
Let me I don't know, let me try and summarize my thoughts on this. The problem here is not debt. Debt is not a bad
It's
thing.
a good thing.
Borrowing other people's money is good, is sweet.
That's the best way to
But if
raise
you're
a business.
borrowing other people's money
And you're using it to buy car,
to go and do wafekulai, you're in trouble. And that's what we're doing.
Okay, so here's my question to you, right? Okay, so we know that we're not using this money to do the right things.
Yeah.
However, and I'm asking, okay, so we started to feel the pinch. If we stopped borrowing altogether and we said, okay, you know what, some of these infrastructures that we've borrowed for, let's work on them, would that be sustainable?
We have a spending problem. We need to spend on the right things. I'm answering your question.
Okay.
We need to spend on the right things. So the issue here is not stop borrowing. The issue is, please, can you use the money you're borrowing for the right things? If you read that article, someone is making an allusion to, it's an election year, and the majority of the spending that's going to happen is going to happen in 2022. And this ramp up on borrowing,
and if you
right?
look, if you
we
look
know
at
exactly where
if
it's
you look
going.
at the increment on the budget, are you in about 37 billion of it is going to go into all those their schemes.
All right, let's take a few messages. This one here from Tony says, good morning for now, Nigeria. No Nigerian leader can remove the petroleum subsidy is the brainchild of corruption. For now, any government that attempts to remove the subsidy is definitely going to go with it. This one from Tony says, everyone's talking about subsidy this morning. Anyone talking about subsidy should first of all talk about refining crude in our country or no subsidy at all. And this one here says, okay, I'll take this message. This one here from Shegun says, Northern extremists banned the Northern anthem and services from the Southeast. The radio analysis will not be as civilized, I just heard. This should be roundly condemned because it could be a declaration of something else. All right, thank you so much for that, Shegun. This one from Ken from Surulere says, good morning, everyone in the studio. The country will not cease to amaze me. Why not fix the refinery first and naturally fuel subsidy will fizzle out naturally? Before this president came to power, he promised to reverse, but then the case is different. Okay. So we see what you're trying to say here. Thank you so much for that. Final message before we go back into the stories. This one says, what is government doing with all the monies borrowed, and we are generating enough to pay back? And are we not generating enough to pay back?
No, we're not.
Talk less of generating wealth. We're operating a voodoo economy. Doesn't make sense at all. From Winga Kamu. Real quick, let's move on to our next story.
Like how we're pretending like this administration, when it was in the opposition, didn't tell us that subsidy was a big lie.
Okay, so next one comes to you, Justin. It talks about the budget. So it says, why I signed the 2022 budget despite the National Assembly's worrisome changes. And, we've talked about this. All through last week we talked about this. There's been a back and forth with the president, the National Assembly. There's been some changes made. Some people were of the opinion that the president should not have, signed it despite the changes made. But then again, what's your assessment on this?
Well, I don't know why this became a talking point, because it happens every budget cycle. The executive submits the budget and the National Assembly members tinker with it, include what they call constituency projects into it, and it still gets signed. They have this back and forth all the time. It's almost like, I'm going to call you out so everybody knows that you're part of the pork barrel, right? The president's spokesman is telling us, Mr. President is not angry about it. In line with his democratic nature, he chose to sign it, even though the National Assembly could veto it if he didn't sign it. Okay, I'm glad that we're acknowledging that there's a thing like a veto, right, that the National Assembly has in its toolkit. But I don't know why you're telling me that the president is not angry, he still signed it. I don't care about his anger. I care about making policy that works for the people of the country. So they've included 6,500 new projects worth about 37 billion into this budget, right? The Constitution allows for them to do it. It's not, in my view, not right. I don't think that the legislature should be part of infrastructure projects and stuff, which is what those projects are mostly about. And we all know how it works. A legislator has people who execute these projects in their constituency rather, and it's up in the air whether allegations about diversion of money. Nobody has been taken to court or arrested by EFCC about it, but we know how the thing goes. So this story for me is fluff. The president has signed the thing. There's no need for you to come and tell us you're not angry. You didn't want them to tell you. You signed it. Can we move on?
But then again, is there a way to keep tabs on some of these projects? Because, like you mentioned, some 6,000 projects were inserted into this budget, which caused the trouble.
There are some NGOs that actually track those projects. Is it Tracker NG?
There are a number of them.
There are a number of NGOs, non-governmental agencies that do the work of tracking these things, reporting them. I don't know if the NBS used to do it under Dr. Yemi Kale. I can't remember, but there were some private sector initiatives about tracking those projects.
All right.
Like I said, it's not a biggie for me.
It's been like that since Obasanjo.
Let's move on to our next story real quick. This one comes to you, Wadi. It talks about Nigeria turning into a dumping ground without border checks, and federal agencies generally are warning. This comes from the Punch newspaper. Let me put a background to this. It says, following the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, 2 federal government agencies have warned that Nigeria will become a dumping ground for agro products from other African nations if the country fails to introduce quarantine checks at all its airports. And it goes deeper than that. They're talking about how other countries have overtaken Nigeria in terms of production, amongst other things. What are your thoughts about this?
this is it's quite interesting. And why do I say that? That as large as we are as a country, we don't have quarantine storage in other ports. It's amazing, and especially for fresh products. Um, just in that circle, you know the things that expiry
Are you
dates
in that circle?
and all. He's in
I don't
a
know what he's
number of
talking
circles.
about.
Anyway, but the question is this: 2022, we don't have places where you're going to be able to check products that come into Nigeria. It's shocking, and that's why you have a number of things, expired products that come into the country, goods that fresh produce that are already bad. Um,
Yeah, but what do you know, for as far as it concerns subcontinental trade under AFSCA, right? Most of the goods that will be coming in will be coming in through the ports. Will be coming in across borders, land borders.
yeah,
Right.
but
So
it's
if
all
you're
over.
talking
Now.
about quarantine,
so
for
go-
instance, the cattle we were talking about before,
Okay.
most of it comes from
Yeah, but that's raw.
neighboring
That's
Sahel
that's
countries,
that's
you know,
raw material
Nigeria.
and not the finished produce. But the finished produce,
but
if they were
wait.
going to bring meat, whether it's going
Mad
to
cow disease, bro. Have you
Eh,
heard of
so
that?
those are the things that we're talking about now. How do you check them? If you don't have imports, you don't have in airport. Are you sure you have on land?
Now you've answered the question I was just going to ask you now. So
You don't have them
how
anywhere.
do we, since we know that we have a quarantine problem, how then do we checkmate this problem? Because I mean, we know that there's a huge market for this. We talked
Elect
about
me in
how-
2023.
outside electing you in 2023, how can we checkmate this? I mean,
There are see, that's what this agency is talking about.
okay.
There are agencies that are responsible for that. Are they being funded? That's one. Two, what are the necessary things? The equipment, the resources, the people, and they're complaining because if you read the story, some of the things that how much did they call it that the European Union has seized in the last how many years? It's amazing that we're exporting goods and nobody's even checking the standard.
Weevil in the beans.
Weevil in the beans, the yam is rotting. Someone
So
actually.
how then do we generate revenue for this if no one is checkmating?
No, they've collected their monies. The customs have taken their taxes. The agencies have. So everybody has gone on, and the poor producer.
So first things, and someone has mentioned that in one of the articles, the NCS, the Nigeria Customs Service, really shouldn't be a revenue generating agency. They should
Okay.
focus on the logistics of the operation of import, export, and all of that. And some other agency, I don't see why the FIRS shouldn't do it, right? Be the revenue collecting
Agency for
window
this.
for the federal government, yeah, and other bodies that should get the revenue. The customs should focus on the grunt work of making sure that what's coming in is coming in according to standard, what's going out is going out according. There should be a standard enforcement agency, and we should remove. And I think the minister of finance has spoken about this. She's flying that kite already. I hope that they push that through because really the customs is one of them.
They generate a
Allegedly,
lot of
one of the
revenue.
most corrupt agencies around.
It's good you mentioned allegedly, though.
Yeah.
This one here from Ola says the federal government, they're borrowing for capital projects. And also,
Where are they?
from Emeka says, please, our refinery should be put to work in full capacity and let this monster called subsidy be removed.
The government should get out of refining petroleum products. Simple as that.
This one here says, from Bengakam, it says, what is government doing with all the monies borrowed and we are not generating enough to pay back? Talk less of generating wealth. So operating Kudu account, I think I talked about this earlier. He says the irony of constituency projects inserted into the budget is many of such projects will never be executed, yet monies will be released and spent. He further says Nigeria is not already a dumping ground for goods? What is it that official that official is talking about? We excel in confusion and wow. Okay. This organization. And this person comes in to say on subsidy issue, both government and Nigerians deserve what they get. Both are now absolutely on a stalemate. Nigerians have continued to vote for the better evil during elections rather than the best candidates, and the better evil in government have continued to run the government with deep sense of entitlement. Elections again is next year, and the present evil in government needs to win elections, but with resources to do so. So they need subsidy money, not minding the evil diversions. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And well, let's quickly move on to our next story. We have 1 minute to wrap this up, so I would like to take both of your opinions on this one in one word, really, or in one sentence. It talks about high tariff, forex policies trigger Nigeria's low cargo. It's from the Guardian newspaper this morning. Justin, Wadi, it's your story, but what are your thoughts?
True. Aside from the tariffs, poor port facilities, poor management of ports. So it's improved over the last 5-10 years. But basically, most of the products that are supposed to be coming in through Nigeria are going to Benin, Togo. Even your petroleum products are being what's it called, because the state of the ports themselves are not up to standard.
I mean, it goes back to what we're talking about, the Nigerian Customs Service, right? They don't have scanners at the ports, for instance. So goods are being inspected physically. You bring in a container, they will open it, they will rifle through